Hey everyone, and welcome to this Londoner News Explainer. So today we are tackling something that has absolutely blown up online recently. New Prime Minister Andy Burnham's proposed road safety plans. Whether you literally just passed your test yesterday or you've been behind the wheel for 50 years, there's a ton of noise out there about what these new policies might actually mean for your license. So as always, we're cutting through the chatter. We're going to rely strictly on the facts, the hard data, and the official reports to see exactly what's on the table.
Right, here's our agenda for today. We'll start with the new PM's transport vision, fact-check those over-70s retest rumors, and look at the case for eyesight tests. Then we'll explore the young driver safety crisis, explain graduated driving licenses, and finally look at balancing safety with independence.
Part 1. The new PM's transport vision and Andy Burnham's carrot versus stick approach.
If we really want to get a read on where the Prime Minister is taking national policy, we've got to look at his track record. Now, Burnham famously rolled up to Downing Street in a Range Rover, and his time as mayor of Greater Manchester tells a pretty fascinating story. Back in 2022, he actually paused the region's planned clean air zone. His reasoning? He felt that charging drivers and businesses during a massive cost of living crisis just wasn't justifiable. He vastly prefers the carrot over the stick. That means he's a fan of offering grants to upgrade vehicles and pouring money into public transport, like building Manchester's B network, rather than just slamming motorists with penalties. Now, his national stance on things like the zero-emission vehicle mandate or pay-per-mile charging, that remains a bit of a blank page for the moment.
But the really crucial takeaway here is his commitment to something called Vision Zero. He pioneered this locally, and the goal is incredibly ambitious: completely eliminate road fatalities and life-changing injuries by 2040. It all relies on a safe system approach. Basically, it accepts that, hey, humans make mistakes, but it aims to design road infrastructure and policies so that when those mistakes inevitably happen, they don't result in absolute tragedies. And look, if you're sitting there wondering why this is such a massive priority right now, just look at this number: £46 million. That's the estimated economic output lost in Greater Manchester in just 1 year, 2022, purely due to fatal, serious, and slight injuries on the road network. So Vision Zero isn't just a moral imperative, right? The data clearly shows it's a massive economic priority too.
Moving on to Part 2, fact-checking over-70s retests, separating social media myth from policy reality.
Okay, you have probably seen the internet completely freaking out over this, so we need to separate social media myth from reality. Older drivers are understandably worried. You might have seen something exactly like this pop up on your feed. One viral post says, "What have I and my fellow pensioners done to upset our new Prime Minister?" Today, he is talking of all drivers over 70 taking a new driving test. Now, that sentiment has caused genuine panic for older drivers who are terrified they're about to lose their independence, their way to get to the doctor, or just their freedom to grab groceries.
But let's take a breath and impartially look at the facts. Because somewhere between the government drafting a policy and hitting social media, a simple eyesight test magically morphed into a full-blown practical driving test. The myth is that everyone over 70 has to jump in a car with an examiner, do complex maneuvers, and pass a full hazard response test. The actual fact, what's currently proposed under the road safety strategy, is just a mandatory eyesight test every 3 years when renewing their license. That's it. Absolutely no practical driving test is being proposed.
Which brings us to Part 3, the case for eyesight tests. Why are the current rules suddenly under scrutiny? To see why they're zeroing in on eyesight in the first place, we really need to look at the current setup. Right now, when you hit 70 in the UK, you just have to self-certify that you can read a number plate from 20 meters away. To picture that, it's roughly the length of 5 parked cars. And here's the kicker: there is literally zero independent check behind that declaration. The UK is actually one of only 3 countries in all of Europe that still relies purely on you just promising your eyesight is fine.
Well, this self-reporting honor system really came under fire recently. A senior coroner up in Lancashire investigated a string of fatal crashes involving older drivers. And alarmingly, the coroner found that the deceased driver's eyesight was well below the legal standard, even though they had, you guessed it, self-certified as perfectly fit to drive. Specialists are pointing out a very real human factor here. Vision often declines so gradually that a driver genuinely doesn't even notice it's getting worse. And just as a quick aside, some experts are also floating the idea of cognitive assessments, but that's a completely separate, totally undecided issue for now.
To really put this into perspective, just look at this stat. In 2024, approximately 24% of all car driver fatalities involved folks aged 70 and over. That data objectively highlights the statistical vulnerability of this demographic. And that is exactly why the government is eyeing interventions, like a simple 3-year vision check, to help support that Vision Zero goal.
All right, part 4, the young driver's safety crisis. Let's look at the other end of the generational divide.
To grasp the full scope of this road safety puzzle, we've got to pivot completely to the other end of the age spectrum, because there is a totally different crisis unfolding there. Almost 5,000. That is the number of casualties recorded in 2024 involving drivers aged 17 to 24. That one demographic accounted for roughly a fifth of all people killed or seriously injured in car crashes. And honestly, this stat right here just brilliantly illustrates the imbalance. Looking at dangerous driving endorsements in 2023, drivers under 25 racked up 38% of them. Why is that so crazy? Because they make up just 7% of all license holders. That is a staggering disproportion. So what is actually going on here? Well, the data shows it's a mix of behavioral and environmental stuff. Basically, for young drivers, those parts of the brain handling impulse control, they're literally still developing. We see crashes really spike during high-risk hours, like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and late on weekend nights. Environmentally, nearly half, 49%, of serious young driver casualties happen on rural roads. Behaviorally, a tragic 1 in 6 young drivers involved in serious collisions weren't even wearing a seatbelt. And ultimately, 1 in 5 crashes happen within the very first 12 months of passing the test. That first year on the road is incredibly dangerous.
That brings us to Part 5, Graduated Driving Licenses Explained, the global solution to novice driver crashes. To tackle these scary statistics, a lot of safety advocates are pushing hard for a system that's already saving lives all over the world. It's called a Graduated Driving License, or GDL. Essentially, it's a system that gives new drivers a staged introduction to driving. Now, it is absolutely not an outright ban. Instead, it places temporary restrictions on new drivers, things like zero alcohol limits, nighttime curfews, or a cap on how many passengers you can have, just for a probationary period. Once you prove you can handle the road safely during that window, you unlock your full privileges.
Take a second to look at the international data on this because the results are, honestly, pretty incredible. When Canada brought in minimum learning periods and nighttime limits, they saw an 83% reduction in teen driver deaths. In New South Wales, Australia, capping passengers and hours led to a 55% drop in fatal crashes for probationary drivers. New Zealand saw a 23% drop, and New Jersey in the US saw a 25% drop in fatal collisions. The numbers don't lie. GDLs are an incredibly effective public health intervention.
Finally, Part 6, Balancing Safety and Independence, the ultimate road safety compromise.
So despite that overwhelming international success, bringing GDLs to the UK is a highly polarized debate. There is a stark divide. On one side, you have the protective view, backed by groups like the AA, saying a GDL is a super low-cost public health intervention that could prevent absolute tragedies and save over 50 lives a year here in the UK. But on the flip side, you have the punitive view. They argue these rules unfairly restrict young people. Think about teens in rural areas with terrible public transport, or young people working late shifts, or those who have family members to care for. Critics argue it risks treating young people as a problem to be managed, rather than individuals who rely on their cars to live their lives.
So, where does the government actually stand on all this? Well, while Northern Ireland is pushing ahead with a full GDL scheme, the national government in Great Britain has stated they don't plan to introduce a full GDL system right now, largely to avoid heavily penalizing young drivers. Instead, they're exploring a compromise, a 3 to 6 month minimum learning period. The idea is to make sure new drivers get way more supervised practice before they pass, without actually restricting their mobility once they finally get that license.
And that really brings us to the very core of this whole road safety dilemma, for Andy Burnham and for the whole country. Achieving Vision Zero is going to require compromises from absolutely everyone, from the 17-year-old just starting out to the 70-year-old needing a quick vision check. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. When we're looking at changing the laws around how we drive, what matters more to us as a society? Keeping our current mobility convenient and totally unrestricted, or making the tough compromises required to actually keep drivers safe and reach zero road deaths? Thanks for watching this Londoner News Explainer, and keep questioning the facts.